to discuss whether that's even achievable is John Eastman. He's a former attorney for President Trump and is senior fellow at the Claremont Institute. John, great to have you back with us, sir.
Thanks for having me back on. This is a very important issue, and I'm glad to be able to weigh in on it.
It's such an important issue. I'm reading some of your work on this subject this week, and one thing that boggles my mind every time I hear it is that Congress will hand the president a certain amount of money to spend on government projects, and the president is not allowed to save money.
That's right. And, there's a feeding frenzy at the end of September every year so that all of the agencies spend all of the money that they weren't otherwise going to be able to spend in time before the end of the fiscal year. They hand out big bonuses, they pay for luxury trips, they do all sorts of nonsense. And most of it is, in my view, unconstitutional spending. And this is, I think, the real heart of the issue here. The courts have been abdicating their duty to enforce limits on the Congress's spending power, to the point where Nancy Pelosi, you may remember some years ago, she famously said, well, we can spend money on whatever we want. It's not true. The text of the Constitution very clearly limits the federal government's ability to pay the debts of the federal government and to provide for the common defense and the general welfare. That meant things of national concern, not local concern. Mm-hmm. And they were very clear about that. I think one of the things that Vivek and Ilan can accomplish is identifying those unconstitutional categories of spending, because I think the president can refuse to spend money in unconstitutional ways without having to ask permission from Congress to do it.
Right. Right, because you write about and I heard Russ Vought talk about this, and thank God he's going back in to be the head of the Office of Management and Budget again. You talked about the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974. Now, you almost fall asleep just reading the title of it, but it seems to me that is an essential piece of legislation if you want some answers as to how things have gotten so out of control.
Well, it is, and it was passed in the wake of Richard Nixon's resignation to avoid a potential impeachment. And one of the things that the deep state in Washington had against Richard Nixon is not the bugging and trying to learn the plans of your opposing political party. Political parties have been doing that for since time immemorial. It was because he was starting to tackle unconstitutional spending or excessive spending, and he was impounding funds that, in his view, didn't need to be spent. And so in the wake of that Nixon scandal, Congress passed this Budget Impoundment Control Act. And it basically says the president can't impound or refuse to spend any funds without first asking for permission from Congress, the very Congress that authorized the spending in the first place. And so it's no wonder we've gone from, $1 trillion in debt at the time to 36 trillion or whatever it is.
Yes.
$100,000 roughly for each man, woman, and child in the country. It's really stunning.
Yeah, it's illegal to save money without Congress's permission. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's totally crazy.
It's insane.
Okay.
So my article here, which is up at thefederalist.com, points out that, under that act, if there's a valid exercise of Congress's spending power, the president can't refuse to spend it unless Congress approves a resolution allowing for it. But the whole point of my article is, but that can't be true when the spending is itself unconstitutional.
Right.
Because the president has an independent constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And that includes the Constitution. And if it's unconstitutional spending, he not only has the right, but he has the duty not to make those expenditures. And I think this is just the president that's willing to take on this issue.
I hope you're right. One of the things that the federal government has done for a very long time now, it seems, is they've conditioned federal spending on states changing their laws. So they force states to adopt certain laws in order to receive federal money. Is that constitutional?
No, I don't think it is. And years ago, the state of South Dakota, wanting to push back against this, on all the conditions that were being imposed on them for federal prison money that was coming in. And they wanted to challenge not the conditions, but they wanted to challenge the legitimacy of the spending in the first place, because it's spending for a local prison. It's the very opposite of the general welfare or common defense. This is a vintage local program. And so they wanted to challenge. We took that all the way to Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court denied our request to take it up. But this is the kind of thing. I'll give you one other story. I used to live in Long Beach, California. And they had a voter initiative, a local ballot initiative, to widen one of our roads and put in nice palm trees. And it was going to cost a lot of money. And the voters voted it down. And then the city officials went and got a grant from Congress to do it anyway. And I said, wait a minute, if the people that were going to benefit from it thought it was too expensive to be worthwhile, why should the folks from Rhode Island pick up the tab for it?
Yes.
This is what's wrong with our we can spend forever whatever we want mentality, and it's indebting. It's creating imprisonment, enslaving our great-grandchildren because they will not be able to come out from under this debt.
Well, the other piece of what you're suggesting here, which is getting back to constitutional spending, that would permit President Trump to achieve what he said on the campaign trail, which is get rid of the federal income tax, raise federal revenues via tariffs, and then if there's something you want locally for your government to do for you, you pay the relevant state tax to achieve that, right?
Exactly. And you connect the people getting the benefit from those paying the tab. And therefore, the politicians don't have any incentive to try and get other people to pay for the benefits for their local constituents. It is basic economics 101. The people that are going to get the benefit ought to pick up the tab, not somebody from 3 states away. And we're just bleeding our country dry with this illegal, unconstitutional spending, and it needs to stop.
How pressing is this issue of $36 trillion in debt? What does it mean for the country that we've reached this point?
Well, I think we're perilously close to the tipping point of going the way of a Venezuela or a post World War I Germany with runaway inflation. I mean, you cannot have that kind of debt incurred by just printing money without it causing catastrophic consequences for inflation. And of course, that is the most undemocratic tax that one can imagine, because you have nothing to say about it, and yet it is a tax on every single person that has to buy food or goods in this country. It's a hidden tax because your dollar is worth less than it was before. And anybody that doesn't know the connection between that kind of debt at the national level and inflation somehow missed economics 101.
Yeah, or they just missed living in this country over the last few years. If you didn't get the concepts before, you certainly got them during the Biden administration, because it really is impacting everybody. And you're right. It's one of those things where Congress passes spending. They don't pass a technical tax hike on people, and yet you are being taxed in the form of inflation.
Indeed. And they'll just go print more money. And, we now spend the overwhelmingly large share of our revenues every year goes to paying interest on the debt. It is insane. And if Elon Musk and Vivek and Russ Voigt and Mark Paletta over at OMB, under the direction of this new commander-in-chief and chief executive, can get a handle on this, they may save this country from the brink that we're on.
Is this achievable? That's the key question here. One of the areas that when we talk about spending in government, you start talking about what people kind of refer to as the third rails: the Medicare, Medicaid, the Social Security, all of the money that's flowing out. And you saw, President Trump has said during the campaign and after, hey, we're not touching Social Security, we're not adjusting ages or anything like that. When it comes to tackling all of this spending, is it even possible? Is it achievable?
Well, I do think it's achievable. You start with unconstitutional spending, and then you move to efficiency elimination of spending. Look, a large portion of our federal government workforce doesn't even bother to go in the office anymore since COVID. That was 4 years ago, and they're still working from home. And they're not working a full honest day's work for that. I often joke. I said next time they have a half inch of snow in Washington D.C., and they say only essential workers come to work, we ought to take that as who's non-essential and say, okay, stay home permanently.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. Yeah. And by the way, in our audience, we have a lot of federal employees, but those are the only ones who count as essential. Let me just say that because
yes, indeed.
Those guys are all working hard, but those people, they call in all the time. They see the people who are working around them. They see the laziness, the lack of attention, the half-assing it. It's not. It's real. What you described is real, and it's cancerous. And in fact, John Eastman, when we talk about the government, one of the biggest sources of jobs during the Biden administration, as they tell us with each passing jobs report, oh, things are great. Everybody's being hired by the government, John Eastman.
Right. They want us all to work for the government, so they have absolute control of the citizenry. And it is no government can long be sustained without a vibrant private sector. And when government spending crowds out private spending, when government employment and jobs and bureaucracies crowd out private industry, you're on a path for destruction. And we've seen numerous examples of that in human history. And I hope people have awakened to the threat in time to prevent it from happening here.
John Eastman, let me play some audio for you. This is on CNN. Congressman Seth Moulton was talking about the fact that Christopher Wray announced his resignation yesterday, thank goodness. But he also says that there could be thousands of federal employees who also resign ahead of Trump's arrival. Take a listen.
Trump wants to politicize the FBI, to turn it back to the days of J. Edgar Hoover, where the FBI has its own really lawless agenda, where the FBI is a tool of the state to persecute Americans, not to actually uphold the law for everybody in our land.
Okay, I'm not even sure what that sound is, but you do have, that's why I stopped it. But you do, he says in this clip, thousands of federal employees are prepared to resign. And my view is good. I mean, if you're freaking out that Trump's coming in and you want to resign over it, isn't that a kind of a sign you shouldn't be in government in the first place?
Well, that's right. And, it reminds me of the New College of Florida phenomena when Governor DeSantis stepped in and changed the board and started to fix the wokeness in the college, and half of the faculty up and resigned. And he said, great, I can make my changes that much quicker now. Look, there's something else he said, though, there that is very important and very telling. It is the best example of psychological projection I've ever seen, that President Trump is going to weaponize the Department of Justice or the FBI. I'm sorry, I'm on the receiving end of some of the weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI. They confiscated my phone a year and a half ago, and they still haven't provided it. I mean, the notion that Trump is going to do anything except end the weaponization that occurred over the last 4 years is laughable. And for these guys to be able to say that with a straight face, either they are unbelievably naive and stupid, or they're just so malevolently dishonest that they can't even see straight.
No, not at all. Yeah, the lies continue, quite unfortunately. John Eastman, you've been on the receiving end, as you pointed out, of those abuses. Thank you very much for joining us, and as always, for being a great American. Thank you, John.